the top 5 competitive budget decks for under $30. I actually was inspired by one of my close friends getting back into Yu-Gi-Oh! Because Yu-Gi-Oh! Can get really expensive. Yu-Gi-Oh! Reminds me of when I hear guys tell girls that they don't pay for dates and the girl is like,
if you broke, just say that.
Yes, I'm broke. I am broke because I'm spending all of my money on Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. You would think that she'd get the point. It's a hierarchy. It goes Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Paraphernalia, then maybe her if I got something left over. After Pokemon. Before I get into this video, I just want to give a special thanks to everyone that has supported me on Patreon, helping me pay my editors. This one's for you, baby. I'll also even be putting deck lists of these particular decks on Patreon just as a special thanks. Without further ado, let's jump on in. Now, I ain't gonna cap. Your boy really wanted to flex his muscles with this. I really wanted to see if I can figure out some $30 budget competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks because my boy JB is gonna be watching this video and he's gonna be like, Kelly, what do I pick up? Dog, look, I'm not trying to tell you over and over again. So this video's for you. This video, of course, is also for players that are just getting into the game or players that may want to try out a new deck. The essentials, the bare minimums of these decks are going to be around that $30 price tag. Now, depending on how you want to upgrade your deck, it's going to cost you a little bit more, but I wouldn't imagine too much. And speaking of such, for beginning Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, one of the best ways to get into the game is to just go buy structure decks. As of late, Yu-Gi-Oh! Structure decks have been fairly decent of getting players into the game, giving them some really good reprints from well sought after cards, but also being decently competitive even at a local level, and the Dark World structure deck does not disappoint. Now, Dark World holds something special for me. I remember back in around 2011 or 12 that the structure deck came out for it, and it was completely game changing. The Dark World cards not only looked amazing, but it was one of the most competitive decks for quite some time. And in 2022, I could see it happening again. Now, we are currently in a format where sending cards to your opponent's graveyard may not be beneficial, but the Dark World cards actually came well prepared. One of my favorite cards from the structure deck is Dark World Puppet, which allows you to banish 3 cards from either player's graveyard. All you have to do is discard a Fiend monster and potentially trigger Dark World monster effects. Are you kidding me? Card's busted, dog. What are we doing here? It's good. That card by itself could potentially be the turning point for Dark Worlds in the TCG to be a seriously viable deck. Bro, let's not cap. These Dark World cards are confusing from time to time. It says your opponent discards 1 card, but if I'm reading it, you discard 1 card. But if they have it, you get what I'm saying. On top of that, the Dark World structure deck does provide reprints for the danger monsters and skill drain. I think that it's a really solid deck. Just like how your boy's been talking about Black Wings, my guy. Broskis, brosif. I'm telling you, dog, somebody's gonna top with Black Wings this format. It's going to happen. If I'm on Hopium, strike me down. Don't strike me down. But seriously, another strategy where 10 years later, we would say is pretty good into this format. Black Wings got some ridiculous support in Dark Wing Blast that actually make Black Wing Dragon a playable Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. I swear, if people went as far in the relationships as Konami went to make bad Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards good, there would be a lot more relationships. These went to hell and back to make Black Wing Dragon good, and boy, is good. Black Wing Assault Dragon almost guarantees that you'll be playing a Black Wing monster inside of your extra deck, strictly because it's one of the best cards, like best synchro monsters ever invented. My guy, you synchro summon this card by using monsters in your graveyard. Dog, what the I even love that it comes with a built-in solution to my last week's video about how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is being killed by a simple problem. It inflicts burn damage so you'll never go into time. Also, a great thing about Black Wing is that it does summon a ton of level 6 monsters, so being able to XE summon into Wolo to be able to disrupt your opponent's graveyard in a graveyard-heavy format is pretty good. I mean, worst case scenario, we're probably just gonna splash a whole bunch of bestial monsters in there anyway. We're gonna make this work. But regardless, if we're being budget because of Battles of Legends Crystal Revenge, it don't even matter. Even the high rarity Black Wing cards are cheap. Now, moving back to the structure deck trend, I gotta say, like, I did have a problem with Konami and structure decks as of recent, but they're not doing a terrible job. I mean, they can fumble the bag and give us another Charmer Cyber Dark structure deck. But seriously, the Crystal Beast structure deck is not bad. It's just most Crystal Beasts are complete ass. I'm sorry, Jesse Anderson players, you guys already know it. Despite most of the Crystal Beasts being pretty bad, fortunately enough, there's some really good Crystal Beasts. I mean, this deck can search Necro Valley from the deck to the hand, and because of how Crystal Beasts are built, they don't necessarily rely on the graveyard, so it's a deck that can play Dimensional Shifter. That's two ways to be able to stop some of the top decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! And prevent decks that are reliant on the graveyard from using the graveyard. Now, Crystal Beast does have some super ultra combos that result in a Nibiru token or being Dark Ruler no more. I personally prefer the Conclave version, which is the control version that allows you to disrupt your opponent. But I mean, if you feeling real zesty, you can end on that token. Just stay rainbow, my friend. Regardless of whatever version of Crystal Beast you play, you did buy 3 copies of the structure deck, which just so happens to be $30. And in return, at the very least, you got one of the most sought after hand traps in Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. So even if you don't like the style of Crystal Beast, I mean, you got one of the most sought after hand traps and a pretty good hand trap. I think it's a fair trade. Dino is another deck that can be made on a $30 budget, but I would not recommend buying the structure decks this time around. Reason being is because the structure decks they're not $30 for 3 no more. But fortunately enough, the cards that made their debut inside of the structure deck are ridiculously cheap. You can still pretty much build a budget Dino deck for that $30 price range and actually include some cards that weren't in the structure deck as opposed to buying it. The reason why I love Dino so much in this particular format is that it can be so Xyz focused. Being able to summon monsters like Baguska to be able to stop top decks like Fluunda Reese, and also being able to make Abyss Dweller to be able to clap up the Tier Element deck. At its core, Dino isn't necessarily an Xyz deck, but not only does it do that well, it can Synchro Summon and Link Summon, giving you the adaptability to be able to play whatever cards you want as long as you can afford them. And I'm saying, Dinos can actually go from a broke struggle deck to like, yo! How much money you trying to drop, big dog? It's also another duality that I like about Dino. It's affordable for everyone, and if you really want to bling the deck out, it can get really nice. I just so happen to have made a Dino deck profile last week for everyone that wants to see, and I also included budget options for the players that may not be able to afford some of the cards that I'm playing inside of the deck. Also, as for that Dino mat, big dogs, I'll let you back order them. I actually wasn't expecting so many people to demand the Dino mat, so instead of buying one of these decks, you can take that $30 and buy a mat at TheCaliEffect.com. I advise, not a bad idea. And lastly, if I had to give you another budget deck that can be built for $30, I gotta go with an oldie but goldie. True Draco actually just so happened to have topped a regional fairly recently in a format with Tier 0 Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks. I don't know, I think it's an accomplishment, but then there's also the toxic cards that everybody loves. True Draco could play Floodgates like Necro Valley, and seeing that it isn't a deck that is built upon the graveyard, cards that are built to be able to stop the graveyard don't necessarily hurt this deck. But I found an extra bit of toxicity built into Draco with cards that most decks can't play. Some of your boys' favorite toxic cards. Part 1. Inspector Boarder is a hands down blowout Yu-Gi-Oh card. And in case you're trying to go back to school to be able to read what this card does, allow me to simplify it. Monster effects can only be activated if there are extra deck monsters on the field. This is especially effective against some of the better decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! As they need to activate their effects to be able to get said extra deck monsters to the side of the field. Basically, it says, you ain't activating no monster effects, dog. And what's a game when players can't activate monster effects? Not necessarily a problem for True Draco. Inspector Boarder is an experience that I feel that Tier Element players need to have to push them into their, well, I guess deeper into their villain arc. Inspector Boarder is a Yu-Gi-Oh card that will turn a player from his playful innocence and loving, caring demeanor into his villain arc to take over the world. You don't even need to have the card played against you. All you have to do is just try to read it. Seriously, try to understand this card. I wouldn't do it to you guys. We already know most of you guys can't read. Cards like Inspector Boarder and Amato Awado are staples in the True Draco deck because it's a deck that doesn't need to use its monster effects. It just summons really big monsters to their side of the field. And with other floodgates that this deck can play, like Skill Drain being reprinted multiple times this year, this is a genuinely cheap deck. I even made a competitive $30 True Draco deck build that's still pretty good and applicable for today. All you have to do is just change out a couple of cards to your liking, of course, to make it really viable right now. And there we have it. There is 5 competitive budget Yu-Gi-Oh decks for about that $30 price tag. Of course, again, I am posting deck list on my Patreon as a special thank you for helping me pay my editors. And as I always say, I hope your day is going phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. You can check out more amazing content. Just click on one of these videos, as I'll catch you on the next one.